Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 514 of the Juicebox Podcast. Hey, Erika Forsyth is back. You remember Erika? She's a licensed marriage and family therapist who herself has type 1 diabetes, actually for more than 3 decades. She specializes in working with people with diabetes and their families and caregivers. Today, she and I are going to talk about a lot of interpersonal stuff, relationships, managing type 1 when you're married or with a partner, what happens when one of you is a little better at it than the other, all kinds of different topics today. Erika has been on the show a number of times, so if you enjoy her, check out episode 407, 445, 479, and 473. Wow, you would have thought I would have done those in order, but I didn't. Please remember while you're listening that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you live in California and you'd like to hire Erika, you can do that. I'll put her contact information in the show notes and at the end of the episode. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Touched by Type 1. Please check them out. They have a mission to elevate awareness of type 1 diabetes, raise funds to find a cure, and inspire those with diabetes to thrive. They have a ton of programs. You can find out all about them at touchedbytype1.org. Now, if you love the Facebook, they're there, and Instagram, just the same. So Instagram, Facebook, and touchedbytype1.org. At that link, find out about their annual conference, their dance program. They have a beautiful program where they send out information to newly diagnosed people. They call that their D-Box program. You can go right now and ask for a D-Box. Listen, it's a great organization. I speak at their events every chance I get. I'm really excited to support them. Don't forget that their programs and services are for those living with the daily reality of type 1 diabetes. They offer a supportive community with many interactive programs and creative resources designed to empower one to thrive with T1D. If you're interested, there are links in your show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Here comes Erika. Hi, Erika. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Doing well. How are you?
You're doing well, even though I ghosted you last time we were supposed to record?
Yes.
Okay.
We can still be friends.
I'm apologizing in front of people so that you know I mean it, because I've been told that my apologies do not seem sincere. And so I want to make sure that I'm being sincere. I just messed up, and actually my calendar messed up, but I also know it's important not to blame other things when you're apologizing. So it's my fault. But honestly,
I accept your apology.
Thank you. It's Apple's fault, if we're being clear. We have a couple of questions here that seem to go together. This one from Katie. How do I handle disagreements between caregivers over management approaches? And she sort of got a secondary question in here that I think goes right along with it. And she says, how do I handle when one person is better at managing than the other? So that seems like a real interpersonal question, right?
Yes. Well, I think when we're thinking about caregivers or couples trying to co-parent and co-manage their child's diabetes, I would first want to take a step back and assess how is your relationship doing in general. While the diabetes could be significant, interfering in how you are relating as a couple, were there other issues prior to the diagnosis? I would want to assess, your communication, your emotional and physical intimacy, and maybe say, is it appropriate before diving into how to manage the diabetes? Is it appropriate to go and maybe do some therapy or some work around your basic kind of communication skills and understanding of how you relate to one another? So that would be the first step. But if you feel like you're in a good place as in your relationship with your partner and things are going well in in other areas of your life, then I would then dive into the type 1 and first maybe understand. I think in your world too, Scott, that it's pretty natural for one caregiver to kind of be the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
And that happens because, as we know, it takes a lot of time and consistent work and understanding of all the nuances of how your child's blood sugar goes up and down based on food and exercise and all the small intricacies around that.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes time. And unless both caregivers from the beginning are equally spending the same amount of time understanding all of that, it's natural for one caregiver to understand it better.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to ask, is this what it's making me feel like is this what would be commonly put under the heading of correlation does not imply causation? People don't really like, I hear what you're saying. Like, you've now introduced this new thing into your life, but it's not as if we're all walking around in a perfect existence and now we have a problem. We have a lot of little problems that many of us have learned how to ignore, not necessarily deal with. And now this thing's pushed to the forefront. It is not ignorable, right? You can't look away from yours or your child's diabetes the way you could look away from a snoring spouse or, something, even more, impactful. Is that what you're saying here? Is like you kind of got to get your ducks in a row before you can tackle this thing?
If you had the time and were able to do that, because I think if there are other underlying issues that you have either been ignoring, or you can still kind of function in a normal, quote, normal way in a relationship, that's one thing, right? Like if you're functioning, you're doing your work, maybe you're managing your children, whether you're both are, working at home or not, or outside the house. But then, yes, like this piece, you can't ignore. You can only ignore, ignore the dishes, ignore like your responsibilities in the home.
Yeah.
And it's eventually something will happen. But yes, you can't ignore this. But this diagnosis could be the moment when you realize, we do need to deal with these other issues as well in our marriage or our relationship, so that we can then move forward together, whether that means one person is the primary caregiver of the type 1 or that you both are. But I would really encourage couples, like, for example, if they do come to work with me, we will work on the diabetes piece, but often I will encourage them to also go to either marital or relational therapy to address kind of these other underlying issues.
I'm going to say something that you might find crazy, but that's amazing advice. And if anybody wants my opinion, go do that. But if you're not going to do it, or if you have a spouse who won't get involved, or you're just saying to yourself, I can't afford that. I know this is going to sound crazy, but let's reverse engineer your understanding of the human mind. How do we put this into a little tiny box that we can ignore? If we like, I know that's wrong, but don't you think that's what's going to happen in some cases? And we don't ever give people, not you and me, but in general, we give people great advice in the world, but it's not always followable for everybody. Like, how do we make it followable for the people who don't have the time or the inclination, who might be listening and saying, this isn't because I need to go to therapy, it's because my husband's a jerk. Like, when you're thinking that way, like, is there a way, boy, is this the wrong thing? Is this like asking how to do drugs safely? Although I've done an episode on that. So I guess maybe, that is my question. Do you have anything, like, are you just you can just say pass, but do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that question, because in reality, yes, it does take time. It does take money. It does take, if you're going to therapy and you have multiple children, you have to there's so many, you have to get a babysitter. There's so many things in order to do that and prioritize your relationship. And in real life, that sometimes feels impossible. And so I understand that and I get it. So if we were to say, okay, that's not a reality for, this family, then I would then say, okay, what's the next best thing that we can do? A couple things. I think if one person is managing, quote, better or has a better understanding of how to manage the child's diabetes, then there needs to be maybe an agreement, within the household of, okay, this person is going to manage the day-to-day. But at the same time, the other partner has to come to at least a basic knowledge level. And maybe that means going and listening to your pro tip series, or having, like a day in a life of being the primary caregiver, to understand not only the time and energy it takes to be, watching the CGM all night long and not sleeping and dealing with the lows and the highs, knowing that like a soccer practice is going to affect your child's blood sugar may be different than the soccer game. Like all these small things that you get to pick up on if you are the primary caregiver. And so
the pressure, I don't want to cut you off, but the pressure, I think, is such a big one. Like when you're in charge of keeping someone healthy, there is a low din of pressure that doesn't go away if you don't know what you're doing. Like if you understand it, then the pressure comes and goes situationally. But when you don't understand it, it feels constantly 24/7 like you're killing somebody. And that's not obvious to the other person who's not involved in the management. I mean, I have to say for me, that's been the biggest leap, is to get across to, like, when you do such a good job. Well, that came out wrong, but I do a really good job taking care of Arden's blood sugar. So much so that she probably doesn't, and hopefully never will, feel the full possibility of impact from diabetes. And because of that, her perspective is different. My wife's perspective is different. If they lived in a house where her blood sugars were ping-ponging all over the place for the last 12 years, then they'd see it differently too. But it's possible I make it look easy sometimes, but it doesn't make it less impactful on me. And then you can't get that, I don't want to call it respect, but you can't get that understanding from onlookers. I don't know if all that.
Yes.
Sense.
So because you are doing it so well, and I hear your concern in saying that, like you're doing a great job. Right. And so then nobody else is experiencing the side effects or the consequences of the, the roller coasters, et cetera. And so then people might think, or your wife might suspect, oh, it's not that hard.
Right.
But in reality, we know that the primary caregiver experiences burnout for sure. All of the things that we've talked about in the other episodes, the distress, the burnout, the resentment of, I am working hard to keep our child alive and my partner doesn't understand how hard it is. And then that leads to resentment 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So while it might not work in a lot of families to have this like equitable and equal amount of time in terms of co-managing, there does need to be some level of understanding, which will lead to the respect and the gratitude of what it takes to do what you're doing.
And the knowledge to know when not to shit on what's happening. Like, I don't really know a better way to say that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm in charge of the checkbook, Erika, and you have nothing to do with it, you don't look over my shoulder every once in a while and go, what are you doing here? It's like, look, if you want to be involved in the checkbook, be involved in the checkbook. But, we've been together a long time here. Everything's fine. All the bills are paid. We got a little savings going. I'm doing a good job. Like, it would be like if I showed up at your office, stood in a corner, and 15 minutes into a session said, hey, Erika, are you sure that's the question you want to ask here? Like, you'd be like, who are you in this situation? You don't know what's happening. It can be very difficult not to respond like you've been attacked, even if maybe that person wasn't attacking you. Maybe they were just like interested or thought they had a good idea to add or something like that. But I mean, maybe I'm just letting too much of myself out here. But but you know what I mean? You can feel really like somebody's coming after you in that situation.
Right. And so then I would say, okay, going back to, okay, how are you communicating as a couple? What are you leading with? What is your tone? How are the questions being asked? Is it, why did you bolus this amount for that food, in that kind of tone? Or is it, gosh, I'm really curious, so I know for next time, can you help me understand why you gave this amount for that food?
Those little sentences are so incredibly important in personal communication, especially amongst people who've been around each other for a long time, because you just get the feeling like the other person knows what I mean, but they don't. It doesn't matter how long you've been together. It's a very nice way to start a conversation by saying, hey, I was wondering if you could explain to me what just happened here, because I don't understand it and I would like to. Like, you have to put yourself in a slightly, I don't know, like professionally speaking, if it's a dominant and sub position, but you have to be kind of in the sub position for a second. Like, I find, listen, I'm pretty good at talking to people, and I think that one of the ways you talk to people well is by making them feel comfortable and letting them feel like they can get their thoughts out. And when you come at somebody and you're very demanding, that does not ever happen that way. And so I think even when you've known somebody for a very long time, those words that might feel like the polite words you say for the guy at the gas station really should be used between people who know each other as well. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think tone has everything to do with, how we deliver and receive messages. Obviously, body language and words are important too, but tone is extremely important. And understanding that if you are the non-primary caregiver, there needs to be that level of understanding that my partner is exhausted because they probably aren't sleeping well at all. And they are constantly under this level of stress of what, trying to keep your child alive. But you aren't going to get that, or you won't be able to come from that position of empathy unless you have this basic level of knowledge and understanding.
Right.
And so I think going back to that point of how can you integrate your partner into the co-management, or at least co-understanding of what it means to manage the diabetes. And I think, some families that I've worked with, they will, like, if one caregiver is away for the weekend, then the other person is forced to learn, right? And trial by fire, maybe the other caregiver is helping via text and call. Okay, I see the arrow going this way. Let's do this. But slowly allowing, the other caregiver to experience what it's like. And maybe the other caregiver is still the primary one, but to allow for these opportunities for both the primary caregiver to get a sort of a break and the other caregiver to experience, wow, that was really challenging, to build in that empathy and understanding. The other point around so the tone to build empathy and understanding. I'll pause there.
No, this is, because we talked before we started recording, but this is about to happen to me. Like, I'm going to have to help my wife manage remotely for 6 days or so while I'm gone somewhere. And I'm reminding myself as much as I'm reminding other people, but I wonder too, like, is it folly to say to the person who's in that situation, now here's another job for you. Explain it to your spouse how they need to, be to make this successful. Like, maybe you should just force them to listen to this and be like, listen, just listen to that. That's what I mean to say to you, but I don't have time. you know what I mean? Like, because when do you run out of time? Like, because this isn't your only thing. Like, it's funny what we just explained. As a person who was a stay-at-home dad for 20 years, you take out the word diabetes and put in housework, and we just had the same exact conversation, honestly. Like, I did things around the house that people didn't appreciate. And everyone who does the dishes or the laundry or, sweeps under the bed, they understand that, when your spouse isn't sneezing at night because there's not a big dust bunny under the bed, nobody stops to thank you for that. They don't even know what happened. It's the idea of stopping yourself from taking people for granted, I guess, right?
Yes. And I think it goes back to the time and the energy of, oftentimes caregivers will tell me, like, well, it's just easier for me to do it, so I'm just going to keep doing it. But we know that you can't do that forever. We also know that diabetes isn't going to go away. And so you're going to continue to experience that pattern of resentment and burnout if you aren't getting any kind of support or understanding or gratitude for what you are doing. And so, I mean, if your partner was open to either listening to the episodes, the pro tips or the basic diabetes understanding. I know for a lot of families upon diagnosis, because the other caregiver either has to work or take care of the other kids. So from the get-go, it is often one caregiver and the child in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And learning what it means, going through all of the seminars and classes and education. And so even from, day one, the one caregiver is going to know and understand more than the other because of circumstances and not because they're trying to be cruel.
Yeah.
And so, but then the patterns, continue. So I think it's never too late to ask your partner to say, gosh, we're experiencing this cycle of, you either criticize the way I'm doing it, but you don't really understand how to do it, or I'm feeling resentful because you don't know how, or I'm so exhausted and stressed out that I have no time to connect with my caregiver because I just need to sleep when I can. To say all those things out loud when you're not in the midst of an argument, and then ask for okay, how can we not necessarily fix this, but address this? And maybe it is having some understanding. Maybe it is allowing the other caregiver to experience, taking the kids to the park, or your child with diabetes to the park, right. Having these small moments of wow, that was really scary when I noticed my child was going low and I didn't have anything to bring it up, we didn't have any snacks. So all these things, allowing the other caregiver to experience, to hopefully build in that empathy, which is what you really want is empathy and understanding and gratitude as the primary caregiver from experience.
May I lay down just a little layer of blue collar advice here? And I know this is not going to be politically correct, but if you can't get all that done, coming as a straight guy, from my opinion, if you just said something like, if you understood extended boluses better, I'd have more energy for sex, that probably moves most guys in the direction you want to go.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah, that's all. That's what I do.
Bottom line.
Yeah. You make me a girl. That's how I attack this. I'm like, listen, what you don't understand is, and then whatever, floats the person's boat on the other side, I say there'd be more of that if there was more of this from you. I think that puts most guys right back in line, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. And by the way, men who aren't swayed by that,
the best advice of this whole episode.
Yeah. And men who aren't swayed by that argument, I don't understand you at all. What do you think of that? I once drove to Delaware to have sex. Do you understand? I didn't live in Delaware. I was like, wait, what? No. What's going to happen if I come there? Oh, I'm on my way. We just get some gas in the car and take a shower. Here I go. I'll be there in 4 hours. Yeah, you got to understand how to move the chess pieces around. But it is such a huge problem, not to make light of it. But I do want to walk across the courtroom and take the other side for a second.
Okay.
If you're the person who doesn't get it, I always want to say that, because I see people online, they're always like, my spouse doesn't understand, and they always act like it's on purpose. They don't get involved on purpose. But I wonder how many times those people aren't scared out of their minds or afraid to do the wrong thing. You know what I mean? Also, there are a lot of people who are afraid to act until they're sure. And I know that seems like the same idea, but it's not. There are some people who can't make an action until they have all the answers before they go. And now you're making this a health issue around a child, probably, I'm guessing, a child that this person loves a lot. And they're probably like, I don't know what to do. I mean, you're keeping her alive. Let me stay out of it. And then, the human part gets involved, where you do realize this is easier not to be involved in this. And that's where it starts to go wrong. When you willfully stay out of it is different than when you stay out of it because you're afraid. There's a difference there, I think.
Yes, I appreciate that perspective, because I think maybe what could be helpful in that, if that is the case, to sit down with your partner and say, can you help me understand why, like maybe you've gotten into these patterns and roles, right? But you're realizing it's not sustainable. And to say, like, have your partner or give your partner an opportunity to say all of those things, to say, gosh, I'm either scared because I don't know how, and I'm fearful of making a mistake, and you are much better at it than I would ever be. And I don't want to try. I don't want to mess it up. And I think that would be helpful too for the primary caregiver to hear that and maybe have some empathy too of like, okay, maybe I've just done it all and it's easier for me to do it, but I'm experiencing all these side effects. But my partner may want to try, but there's fear, or there's and then that what has led to, well, I don't want to do it.
Right. Well, now what about
yeah, go ahead.
What about in a more what's the word? What about when your partner is actually a bad actor? There's a question here. I'm not going to attach the person's name to it, but it says, what if the other parent pretends that you don't exist, will not help you, or give advice without making you feel like a horrible parent that is killing their child? I guess what I'd like to know is how to get this person to help me with how they manage our son, which he seems to, when he has so much resentment from me that he can't get over it or put it aside. So this sounds like a scenario where one person wants to help, does not have the tools they need, and the other person is just crushing them every time they come at them. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to kill them, like that kind of thing. And I have to tell you, this message is not gender the way you would expect it to be. So what if you've got a bad actor in the situation? Like, that's a bigger difference. Like, how do you fix it? And I guess, when do you say, the rest of my relationship I'm happy with, this part I'm not happy with? I guess not even just around diabetes. Like, at what point do you just, what I want to say? Like, when do you just accept people's flaws? So there's two questions there.
Yeah. And this question, and I understand that. So the one parent has the understanding of how to do it, and the other parent wants to know how, but when this parent tries, the primary caregiver kind of shames and ridicules and berates this other parent in terms of like, you're doing a terrible job. You're going to kill our child.
Is it a power move? Is that a power move?
It feels, from this particular question, it feels like there might be some other issues going on in the marriage. I don't know this scenario. I don't know this person. But it feels like if there's so much power, and there's shame, and there's there's resentment here because the one parent knows how to do it well and is angry. It feels like there's a lot of anger too underneath this of, you don't know how to do it, and whenever you try, you mess it up. And so it feels like there's either some either felt or expressed anger or sadness even around and not to make it all about sadness, but it feels like there's some other underlying emotions underneath this. And I think and this happens, and I do read a lot on the Facebook group that these kinds of things happen. And if it's to the point where it's so contentious all the time, whenever one parent wants to try to help, I would highly, highly encourage, marital or relational therapy, because I feel like it might be difficult to get to the issue of the diabetes unless there's some rebuilt of like, there's obviously a violation of either trust or love or connection.
It feels like the one person is almost gleeful that there's something to come at the other person with. Like, oh, now I have a really good reason to call them names and tell them they're bad at stuff. Do you get that vibe from that a little bit? Like, oh, just it's an opportunity. Like, I'm a bad person. I'm doing bad things to my spouse, and this is a great opportunity for me to do that. Like, I don't know why someone would want to do that, but if you wanted to, honestly, you don't know how to handle our kids' diabetes is a great way to make somebody feel terrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You usually
And
don't think of people the way I think of them, huh?
Wait, what's that?
I said, I don't think you think about people the way I do.
Well, I like to give people, yes, the benefit of the doubt. And usually when we're lashing out and we're shaming another person because they aren't doing it the way we think we should do things, then I feel like there's something else is underneath that.
Healthy people don't do that to each other.
What's that?
Mentally healthy people don't do that to each other. Is that right? Or not?
Well,
not to this
I would
degree?
say maybe people who aren't necessarily struggling with this. When you are communicating in our, with type 1, one person is going to be fatigued and stressed. And so it's hard to operate and communicate and be mindful of your tone and all that. So I think acknowledging that, but not excusing certain behaviors. I think when you are at this kind of crisis moment of we cannot connect on how to manage our child's type 1, to sit down and try to find moments when you aren't actually heated, to be able to share your experience of how you're trying to manage the type 1 when you're not trying to manage the type 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When I see that become problematic. So first of all, I'm going to flip flop here for a second. I say all the time that you can't let yourself get exhausted because you do not notice it happen. And the detriments from being exhausted are many, they're varied, they go through your life and you do not know you're doing it. Sometimes you are genuinely lashing out at people and not even aware that you're doing it. But that's the thought I've always had in the back of my head too. Like, this isn't a conversation for now, but then the problem becomes, when does that conversation happen?
Yeah.
And and you think, at the end of the day. You mean at the end of the day, Erika, when you get in bed and we're both reminded we're not going to have sex with each other because we're so pissed? Because that's not a fun time to talk. And then you sit there quietly and you're like, I'm going to bring it up. This is a good time. And then you hear the CGM or something like that. And you're like, oh, you just finding, this isn't just around this idea, but time, like pause time, is super important and incredibly difficult to create, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So challenging.
Right.
But I feel like if you want to make changes in how you communicate and relate with your partner, then you have to make certain sacrifices and prioritize. So maybe it's okay. We're not going to carve out an hour. We're going to carve out 10 minutes and we're going to agree to the date and time. And then you're both prepared. And whether maybe you put whatever you need to do to prioritize that 10 minutes or 20 minutes and follow through on that. Because then if you aren't making these times or these moments to connect about the issues that are going to continue, then the issues are going to continue.
See, I think
but
that's
you
the most
both need to be on the same page.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing that's been said so far, is that you're not going to get to any of this inside of another situation. And you really are going to, like, how they say, what do they say? Save the first 10% of your income, right, before you pay your bills, pay yourself before you pay your bills. I think there's something to that. Like, you can look at each other and go, look, we're obviously arguing a lot. Things aren't going well. You're yelling at me. I'm yelling at you. Maybe you're not yelling. Maybe you're like, look, I'm mad at you. I don't even tell you. But we're not going to be able to do that now. We literally need to put on the calendar a space and time. This is when we do it. And we sit down and just agree that you can't let anger into this moment. You can't bring your grudges in here. I'm going to say how I feel. You say how you feel. And the goal has to be for us to find middle ground and not to pile one issue on top of another. I would think one issue at a time. Like, don't go in with a list. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Am I wrong? Like, there's times when I say things and I'm like, at some point she's going to tell me I'm an idiot. Is this the moment?
No, I think, yes, don't go into a list and stay in the emotion as best you can around what you're experiencing. If you were trying to work on connection, because if you don't feel connected, it's hard to problem solve. And so, like, I feel I feel exhausted, I feel resentful, or I feel like I'm doing it all by myself. And then the other person is like, okay, well, I don't know how, or I feel fearful, or I feel like you're never going to give me a chance. If you feel like you can't get through those types of conversations, then that would be another indicator of like, maybe we need to go back to, and not intense, therapy, but maybe it's like 2 or 3 check-in sessions with someone.
Moderated conversations, right?
Moderating helps you communicate and helps you rephrase certain things, being mindful of your tone, all of those things. So I think just understanding when I'm suggesting marital therapy, it's not necessarily, go and try and fix all the things. It's just maybe going back to a couple sessions of basic communication to help rebuild that connection and kind of rebuild that trust.
Yeah. We don't have to.
You guys are in it together. Yeah.
Not everybody needs to be torn down to the bad thing that happened to them when they were 6.5 to get to an answer. Right. You don't need everybody to go to see doctor. It doesn't have to be Freudian psychology, I guess, psychiatry is what you're saying.
Right.
You can just go to therapy and have somebody there who can hear in your sentence that you're about to stir up some shit and stop you and go.
Right. Just be objective, objective listener who can help guide the conversation. And I think that could be really beneficial, but going back to, the first point was, we don't even have time to that. Then just maybe start smaller, start with the 10 minutes on your calendar. And be respectful of the time. So, okay, 10 minutes is done, or whatever the time that you've allotted, and then schedule out the next time, knowing that you're not going to fix everything that first connection, that first calendared conversation.
Can I ask you a question?
But that it's a start. Mm-hmm.
That might not feel like it fits here, but in my mind it does a little bit. Just generally speaking, gender, broken out over gender lines, do we have different expectations? Like, are men's general expectations of a partner different than that of a woman's expectations of a partner? And is that how a person can be doing what they feel is the best they can, and it can somehow ring hollow to the other side because it's not what you're not doing the thing that the other person's actually looking for, and there's no way to know that because you're doing the thing that if somebody did it for you, you'd be thrilled about? That was convoluted, but did you understand what I meant?
Right.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't break it down by gender. I would break it down by personality, by how you were raised. Maybe you're making choices and doing things by your own personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes we either feel like how you were raised is the right way, or you feel like how you were raised is the wrong way and you're going to do the opposite.
Right.
But I feel like we function out of that.
And so people,
I wouldn't break it down by gender, but
okay. Well, no, okay. I was wrong. See, it's good. This is why I like you, because you call me out. But the idea of like, I'm doing the best I can, and oh my God, I wish someone would treat me this way. And then you don't get it back, like meaning like, you're like, oh, it didn't land. You know what I mean? Like the person I was trying to help is just completely left hollow from this. I don't know what to do next. And it's simple to say, like, you can ask that person what they want, but sometimes people don't know what they want. Or sometimes they have trouble telling you what they want. Should we all just live isolated, Erika? Is that what we're learning here? Should we just all have our own cave and live in our cave and then just come out for sex day and then go back in the cave again? Is that what this should be?
Oh my gosh, that would be so sad. No, we are relational. I think we want to be acknowledged, and in that we can also acknowledge others, for all that's been seen and done.
You said something at the beginning that I wanted to kind of end on here with this conversation, if you think we're done. But you talked about like the loss of physical intimacy. And is that an easier way to mend fences than talking? Like if you've lost a physical connection, can leaping back into that or trying to fix that, is that easier to fix than talking? I guess is my question. Or no?
Gosh, I think, well, depending on the couple, one one partner might feel like the reason why there isn't the emotional intimacy because the physical intimacy is lacking.
Right.
And the other partner might feel like, well, I don't want to be physically intimate because I don't feel emotionally connected with you.
Well, that makes sense.
And you could come to an impasse, right? Because one person's needs aren't being met, and then that they're not going to give the other person the other need. So it's going back to understanding what are your partner's needs, and maybe it is okay. Someone needs to give a little.
Yeah.
Whether the partner's like holding out to feel emotionally connected before they feel comfortable physically, or vice versa.
Handhold? Like, it didn't need to be. I know, because I joke around. You probably thought I meant like swinging from the chandelier, but could it just be like holding hands, or like touching someone on the shoulder when you walk past them, or just giving the other person the feeling like you're not avoiding them? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's got to start somewhere. Because because the stuff we're talking about is not intuitive for people sometimes. But like, you have to move in the right direction, or you continue to move in the wrong direction. And like, I just feel like you have to fight upstream sometimes. And maybe just holding someone's hand or sitting next to them while they're watching television or something like that would go a long way to making another person feel comfortable. I might be wrong. I'm
no, I think no, you're good. I think starting small, and we don't. If you feel like there has been zero physical intimacy, and one partner is feeling like there's no way I ever want to have sex with this person until we get to this spot emotionally, to go back, to saying, maybe my partner's love language is physical touch and intimacy. So how can I help bridge that? That might be an easier way, as you said, to start smaller with the small touches, gestures. And that might lead to both of you then feeling more open and ready to have some more emotional intimacy conversations, communication. So I think it just depends on what knowing your own quote love language and your partner's, and then being willing. One person often has to take the first step.
I'm just saying, in those old Tom
which is challenging.
In those old Tom and Jerry cartoons, when they had to get past the bulldog, they'd throw a stake over the fence. That's all I'm getting at here. And listen, the rest of the reality of what you just said, I don't not understand. That a person might not want to be intimate with somebody that they don't feel comfortable with. That obviously makes 1,000% sense. But I mean, once you're in it for a while, once you're married for 10 or 15 years, and you see things are just like, wow, none of this is going the way I want. I mean, are you just riding it out? Like, it just feels like you're just climbing higher and higher on the Titanic, trying not to get wet. It's going to happen eventually. So try something. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yes.
Kate Winslet got away on a bedpost.
To try something, being open to give, trying some intervention, trying some gesture to make a change. Because as we know, if we're not going to change, things aren't going to change.
Stuff's not just going to magically get better. And even that like feeling of like, oh, I'll get mellower as I get older. You'll have too much resentment at that point. It won't matter if you don't have the piss and vinegar to fight anymore. You're still not going to like the person you're looking at, because you're going to feel like you wasted time or life, or I don't know. You got to do something is how I feel about it. Like, you have to try something. And I do think the idea that someone needs to be not the bigger person. I believe in the intent of that phrase, but not the words of that phrase, if that makes sense. Like, someone has to go first. Like, someone's got to swallow hard and go, all right, fine, I'll do this. Like, I'll be the one, and do it with a lot of joy, not angry. You have to be
begrudgingly, right?
Yeah, you can't be begrudging about it. That's all. I fixed the whole world.
But there's hope. I think, just being hopeful and holding on, that remembering. I think if you're at the place where you feel hopeless, to go back to remembering how you first met. As often, this is and I know we're wrapping up here, but maybe it's when you're scheduling that time together, to not at first address the issue at hand, but to reflect on how you first met, the feelings you had, and the experiences you created together. To go back and remind yourself and your partner and reflect together to maybe go back to the beginning could be a place to start as well, to kind of reignite that sense of hope.
How much value is there in being reasonable about who you're with too? Like, at what point do you just say, maybe this isn't what I was hoping this person was going to turn into, but if I'm being honest, this is who they are. They're being really consistent. Like, at what point can I say, I love you? I don't like this part about you, but I love you, and I'm going to stop focusing on the thing I don't like and see the bigger picture. Like, I don't know if that's wrong or not. Like, I'm genuinely asking, like, at what point do you not like expect somebody to be perfect and say to yourself, there was a time when that, picadillo didn't bother me, and now it's the only thing I can look at.
And I think, if you were in that place and trying to figure out how to come to that place of acceptance, embracing who your partner is, loving that your partner, then maybe that's a time for you to do some own like reflection too, whether that's, by yourself, through journaling, reading books, therapy, to kind of get to that place of, can you do that? Do you want to, and can you get to that place of acceptance? Yeah. I
want to be clear that I'm just trying to talk through this. Like, I genuinely don't think, like, if it comes across, like, I think you should, have a whiskey and water at the at the table with the newspaper and his pipe, and it's 1950. And when he comes home, you rub his feet, put on his slippers, and then go flop on the bed till he's ready to bang on you. Like, I'm not saying that. Like, I really am not trying to put that out there. Okay. Like, I seriously don't think that. I don't have those thoughts about relationships. I just think that it's hard to see the other person's side. And sometimes it's difficult to, in this kind of conversation where I'm trying to argue both sides while you and I are talking, that I don't want people to think like, oh, he just thinks that women should, be barefoot and pregnant. Like, I don't feel that way. And I don't think,
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm nervous at the end here because we're talking. I'm like, Jesus, there's somebody out there right now is like, I'm not just going to have sex with him to shut him up, but I'm not saying that. I'm genuinely not saying that. I think
bottom line is that, marriage or relationships, it takes work, and you got to be willing to do the work. And then when you integrate a chronic illness into the equation, it's going to take even more work. And I think oftentimes it's hard to do the work. It just is.
Yeah. There are close to 90,000 scholarly articles that come back if you Google divorce and chronic illness or something like that. So this is not a new problem that you're having. I think that's important to know, that people could feel like, oh my God, this is it. Like, I was bad at being a spouse, or I picked the wrong person. If you think that most people aren't going through this, you're out of your minds. Like this is everybody's life. Like, nobody gets away with this. They just find some people are just better at pretending. I always say the happier people look, the more full of shit they are. So,
that's probably sometimes true. But I think it's just it takes. Yes, that's a very true thing of divorce within, or as a result or a part of living with a chronic illness or having a child with chronic illness. And I think just knowing, that you're not alone, that it is challenging, and it takes work on top of the work that you're doing to keep your child alive.
Yeah. I have a very pragmatic approach to like happiness. I don't expect to be happy every day. And I even expect that there could be days that turn into weeks where nothing that I would, think of as like really super exciting and something I'm glad to be doing, might happen. I might get stuck in a work cycle. It's happened to me over the last couple of weeks. Like, I've had to prepare the podcast. Instead of preparing a week of it, I've had to prepare 3 weeks of it to cover my absence. Right. And so I've been working like crazy. So I've been getting up, working, going to sleep, getting up, working, like I've over and over and over again. And if, I've heard no lie, I've heard 15 hours of this podcast in the last 5 days, like editing and doing things. And I've said, learn more at omnipod.com/juicebox more in the last 48 hours than I've said it in like 3 weeks. So it's not fun work. But I also think that way about life. Like, I think if I live, I don't know, I figure if I live 80 years and the first 15 kind of don't count because I don't really remember them so much. So, if I've got 60 years in there and 20 of them are terrific and 10 of them are pretty good and 5 of them are all right and 10 of them sucked and 5 of them were terrible. And when I get to the end, that's not bad to me. Like, to me, that makes sense that every day is not going to be a carnival. Now, when they start happening in long stretches, obviously that's a different problem. But I mean, I don't have a happiness expectation. I'm happy to be happy, and there are plenty of times that I'm happy, but I'm not sad when I'm not elated. Is that healthy, or am I fooling myself into accepting too little?
Well, I think what you're saying is, life is and can be a grind sometimes.
Yeah.
And accepting that and working towards it, and you're working towards something and you're doing something that you enjoy or are passionate about, knowing that life is going to ebb and flow. And so I think that it's a realistic perspective of there are going to be hard moments. There are going to be moments that feel just kind of ordinary, and there are going to be moments that are great. And to accept that, those seasons don't last forever. Just like, most emotions don't last forever. They come and go. And I think that being able to kind of live in that and through that is where you're at peace.
Yeah.
And it takes work. I'm sure you've worked to get there emotionally.
Yeah, things can and will get better. Like, judging your whole existence by the bad thing that's happening right now, in my mind, is a mistake. There are people on this planet that I love more than myself, and I've had amazing interactions with them, sometimes just days after they've said something to me that I'd think, oh, wow, I'm never going to see this person again. Or this person hates my guts, but they could be also going through something, and likely are. I just I don't give up. Like, I just think, like, this is what it is, and we'll just make the best of it every day. And some days will be better than others. I just want to give people hope, especially when you find yourself newly diagnosed, or you're in that situation where right now you barely understand what's going on, but your spouse really doesn't understand it. Like, it's genuinely not going to stay like this forever. And you might look back on this time and wonder what you were not wonder what you were so upset about. You'll know what you were so upset about, but you'll think, wow, I can't believe we got out of that. I'd never expected to leave that moment, but you can, and you likely will.
Right. But when you're in it and you're in that newly diagnosed stage and haze and shock, I mean, it's hard to accept or even comprehend that it will ever end, that particular stage.
Well, that's when you need somebody to tell you.
Challenging.
That's why I said it, because you need somebody to tell you this isn't going to be like this forever. I mean, the way I usually put it is diabetes is hard. It doesn't get easier. You just get way better at it, and that makes it feel easier. And you shouldn't worry about that distinction, because, you can do hard things, and you are going to do hard things, and it's going to be around diabetes. If diabetes is in your life, that's going to be the hard thing that you're going to do. And you can, like, you get some help, you can do it. It's, and if you don't understand, like you said, like, earlier, Erika, like, referenced, like, listening to some of the pro tips, but she's not just like butter in my bread. She really thinks that, like, you just need somebody. Go find something that's valuable. Like, to me, if you have a spouse that doesn't understand, those defining diabetes episodes are digestible, they're short, and they at least give them context. And then maybe some of the things you say to them, they'll have context for, because you might be using words they don't even understand, and they're just nodding along, trying not to look like an idiot. You don't know.
Yeah.
People are complicated. It's disgusting. The whole thing's a mess. All right.
Oh, life is hard.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's not always hard.
And it doesn't have to be this hard. Like, sometimes you get through it, or you make it better yourself. You are really kind of the master of your own domain. You can, I think that's a Seinfeld episode, which is about masturbation, which is not what I meant. So let's just keep moving. But you can be the master of your, what am I looking for here? What's the word I want? future,
your perspective.
Of anything, of all these things. You can change the way you think about stuff. Listen, it's not apples to apples, but I grew up pretty broke, and my life wasn't terrific. And there are a lot of times you had to get up in the morning and if you want my secret, which is no secret, I'm eternally hopeful. Like, you will never meet a person who wakes up reset more than I do. If something goes wrong today, I will wake up tomorrow with the same enthusiasm I had before that bad thing happened. I don't see another way around it. I don't think I could carry all that baggage. You know what I mean? So I just don't, I don't walk with the weight of the world on my shoulders. I don't believe I could do it. So I reset my hope. I am a very hopeful person, and I wake up every day expecting things to go well. And if they don't, it's okay. I'll try again tomorrow. It's pretty much it. But
yes, it's good. It's healthy.
Thank you. First, let's thank Touched by Type 1. Again, you can find them at touchedbytype1.org. You can also find them on Facebook and Instagram. They are a wonderful organization, and all they really want is for you to check them out. Take advantage of their programs. I also want to thank Erika, and you can find out more about what she does at erikaforsyth.com. That's ErikaForsyth.com. There's so much music left, I'm having a hard time sitting here quietly. I'd like to take just a moment to thank you all. I know this happens frequently, but it happens frequently because of how great you guys are and how supportive you are. The podcast keeps having months that are better than the previous month, meaning there are more people downloading and streaming the show this month than last month, more last month than the month before that. I've had record days, record weeks. For the past 4 weeks in a row, the podcast has grown pretty substantially. It's astounding, actually. The reason I'm telling you is because this is 100% because of you. Absolutely. When you leave a great review wherever you're listening, rate the show highly, tell somebody about it, tell your doctor about it. Doctors, when you tell your patients, it just keeps growing and growing, and the message keeps spreading farther and farther. I am very, 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 very grateful for how much you all put into the podcast. So thank you very much for your efforts, for listening, for downloading, for streaming, however you listen, but mostly for sharing the show. That is a really big deal. I appreciate that you're listening, and I'll be back very soon with another episode.